Lonesome Lands Podcast, the Lonesome Report, February 23rd, 1:37 p.m. I'm back. I was just played hurt last week, sick kind of a little bit. I'm 110% today. Here we go.
Acting
This
like a human.
episode, we're going to talk about glyphosate, endangerment finding, repeal, maybe the fires in Oklahoma, all that stuff. This episode is brought to you by lonesomelands.com. That's how
Yes.
a lot of us get support, I guess, supported by our subscribers. If you go there now, I still don't have a picture of this on the website. But if you go there now, this is the ear tag you'll get if you click support and choose one of those options to subscribe to um, the our information, our content. It's just how you help us keep doing what we're doing. Um, Obviously the biggest headline in agriculture and the entire world is USA hockey is now number one and Canada can suck it.
Amen.
I can't get over it. I haven't. Did you watch the game or did you get into
No,
that at all? Yeah. See, I haven't watched the Olympics for I don't know since I was like a kid, and for whatever reason, my son, who I can't get into any sports at all, decides he wants to watch the Olympics this year, and I'm like, you bet, man, we'll watch the Olympics. And as the Olympics continued, we just got more and more into it. And then there at the end, we were watching every night, and then we're like, oh, we got to get up for the, get up and watch the game. And I watched the whole thing, and I that's probably the first. I've never skated. Never played hockey, probably maybe one of the first full hockey game end to end that I've just sat and watched every second of. And it was the coolest thing. And
well,
then
I know
get
my
the whole
family was
world.
excited.
Yeah, it was awesome. And
It
the
was.
players are awesome. I mean, the whole thing was really cool.
Yeah.
And
When
of course,
I
at the
asked
be
Kelly about it, and I'm like, what's the difference? And she's got like, these guys love America. They are promoting America first. So that's why everybody in my family got into it.
well, and they're just such badass guy. Like the kid that won the whole thing gets. I mean, I don't know how many teeth were busted in half.
I did see that picture.
Yeah. And it wasn't like it happened right before he had been playing for like 5 minutes, I think, with a whole mouthful of broken teeth. I mean, and then you
Dang.
watch these basketball, like I grew up watching basketball. I can't watch it anymore because the guys are such a bunch of, I mean, I grew up with Bill Laimbeer and Charles Barkley and these guys that were like real men. And now we have LeBron James just flying all over the place just because he wants to get a call and nobody even touches him. But
It
anyway,
ain't Larry Bird days no more.
yeah, Larry Bird, that whole
Best
crew.
basketball player
Yeah,
ever.
back in the 90s. Um, anyway, moving on. We'll get into agriculture stuff. The actual probably biggest headline should be the Oklahoma fires
Yeah.
and the devastation and the loss of cattle. I think we're just starting to kind of realize. I've seen some of the pictures coming out of there. Shad's our southern correspondent, so you
Yeah.
can fill us in.
Yeah, I don't know where to start from other than, I guess my whole theory on all of these fires starting is why are we having these fires? I mean, I grew up with uh aged and vintage power lines. Some of the power lines in our country are the very first power lines they ever put up in 1955. And when rural electric finally came really rural in Southeast Colorado, I think we started rural electric in Southeast Colorado in 1937. Anyway, I don't really remember when we had these big fires, but now every time the wind blows, there's a fire forecast, fire danger, which is good. But why are we having these fires? I mean, is it the aging infrastructure? Is it the
So have they
prediction of
determined the start of this one?
I
But they
there was
know
ma-
that,
there wasn't just one though, Jim.
yeah.
That's the key. There's a lot of them, and they always come on these hot days. And I suppose, like where I'm at, a lot of swinging power lines create sparks and stuff like that. But now they've kind of gotten to where they shut the power off for a while, um, if applicable, and so that's a way of mitigating it. But I still am sitting here going, why are we having so many fires? The tragedy is huge, of course. And we saw 2 years ago what happened there in the Texas Panhandle, and those people are still recovering. And some of those have been hit not once, not twice, but some of them hit 3 times in this short amount of time. And there's got to be something different to take place to stop this. Of course, there's a lot of really great people working on these fires again this year, sending lots of hay up there. I think I've kind of stayed out of it myself. 2 years ago, I facilitated like, I don't know, 300 loads to go up there or something like that. It was a bunch of
To the
hay
Panhandle. That was the
to the,
biggest one,
yeah,
I
to the
think, in
Panhandle.
history.
Hmm.
The biggest
And,
fire.
I know a guy by the name of Neil Stevenson from Northwest Oklahoma, and he got burned out several years ago, and the people came to help him, and he said, "I'll never let that die. I'll pay it forward." And I know he himself sent 6,000 of his own bales. He bales a lot of hay to the Panhandle to on the last fire. That was like 2 years ago, and what a hero he was. So, and there's lots of people doing that. I've stayed out of the fray on this one just because of the Commissioner of Agriculture race. You have Nate Sheets running with. Or running against Commissioner of Agriculture Sid Miller, the current Commissioner of Agriculture in Texas, and they're both jockeying for position up there. And so
Did
people
much
have
of
called, and
Texas
I've,
burn?
excuse me.
Did much of Texas burn in this one?
Yeah, there's some big fires in Texas, just
Where at?
southwest. The main fires you're hearing about are southwest Kansas into the Oklahoma, northwest Oklahoma, and the Panhandle. But that line also goes back directly back to the central and eastern Panhandle of Texas as well. So there's a lot of people in Texas that were burned out last time that apparently were burned out again, and not a good situation. But nonetheless, we got to help him, and so I've been in contact with a guy by the name of Lee Wells, who has facilitated a lot of that movement of hay up there, and he has numbers, and we can sure post the numbers if people want to help. There are people needing hay, so
All right.
it's a dry
There's a
booger.
for a dumb Midwesterner, or I guess just
Hmm.
not used to this kind of thing. If you
Right.
have, and right now the thing that comes to mind is cattle are worth so much money, right? And now we're
Correct.
seeing pictures of piles of dead ones. What do they have fire insurance, or do most ranches in that part of the country? Like, how does that get covered? When I mean, you
That's a
lose what's a bred, it's calving season.
four
If
thousand
they,
dollars on a bred heifer, right?
yeah,
I mean, pretty easy. Um, it that just depends. As far as fire insurance goes, that just depends on the individual ranch. But the way overhead is, I'm doubtful that anybody is carrying fire insurance on these cattle, nor should they have to be. Now, blizzard insurance is a whole different story. I mean, I carry blizzard insurance on cattle that I leave in Colorado. That's a pretty important aspect of living in the northern plains. But I guess maybe some of them do have fire insurance on those. I don't know. Other than that, the federal government has to come in and help where they can, and I'm sure that's not the best help. I know that there are people still suffering and struggling to find their way out of the last fires. And you'll remember that story I wrote. There was a gentleman that I spoke of in the story I wrote called Burning Bunnies, about that last fire, and he says, I can I can take a lot of hits, but I'm not sure I can take a third hit. That was the third time he'd been burned out, and I'm sure a lot of people have that same attitude right now. I mean, how much of this can we take? So I don't know. It's a very devastating disease, not disease, but problem. And you read in the history books, and fires in the Panhandle are not uncommon. I mean, a lot of the in that book, the 6,000 miles of fence, which was a story about the XIT ranch. You read in there often about the cowboys just coming across a prairie fire. And a lot of that was birds carrying glass and stuff like that. And the glass heats up and starts a fire on the prairie. That's not unusual, but seems like all of these fires now just start on a windy day. I'm sure swinging power lines is the culprit. But man, I just don't remember all of these things when we were kids. And I've lived on the plains my whole life. I remember lightning starting a lot of fires that would get out of control, but I don't remember fires during heavy, crazy winds. I just don't.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm out of touch.
Yeah, maybe. You don't always remember things completely accurately from when you were a kid. It's not very scientific of you to, I don't know.
I
Sounds like you're being conspiratorial. You think
no, I'm
somebody's
not being
lighting these fires,
conspiracy.
Chad?
No, I don't. I'm not saying anybody's lighting fires. I know that our infrastructure is old. You know, the power grid infrastructure in rural America is old, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. There are a lot of oil wells out there that require electricity to every well to pump up and down, and that is probably a part of it. You know, some stray cigarette on a windy day thrown out a car window could be part of it. Somebody, several years
Smoking
ago,
meth there in western
some of
Oklahoma.
my
That might happen
several
occasionally.
several years ago, we had a fire in my little community in Crowley County, Colorado, that about burned the town down. And some gentlemen were burning weeds several days prior to the fire in irrigation ditches, and there was just some sparks left, some uh, coal left over from those. And when the wind got up, it ignited those several days later. It's been known to happen. I'm not saying this is all conspiratorial or any of it is. I'm just saying as a young adult or as a young kid, I do not remember this many fires every single year.
All right. Well,
So
hang in there,
we,
Oklahoma, Kansas, part of
yeah,
Texas Panhandle, folks.
we'll post the helpline, and I've had a lot of calls about people wanting to find somebody to help donate, and I do have that number. It is Lee Wells out of Texas, and he is facilitating a lot of help and doing a great job. So good for him. We appreciate it, and we'll help as much as we can.
All right. I guess that you start talking about power in the West, and this isn't on our list. So here we go. going
Come on
off
now,
going off script again, but the whole data center thing is just it's like
bizarre.
nonstop news, and I feel like we're behind a little bit getting to this. Um, we don't have, I mean, I don't have a ton of information on it. It's just like, what is going on with
Yeah.
this data center deal? Because I get like one or two here or there, but now it's like you hear about a new one in these very remote areas constantly, and there's so many acres being talked about and so much going on. Like, so I guess for me, it's just like, well, we're gonna get going on this. Even though, yeah, we are behind. It's something that's right in our wheelhouse as far as property
Hmm.
rights and eminent
Yeah.
domain takeovers and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I guess personally, we don't know anyone that's being impacted by it, which doesn't, matter for anything. But yeah, well, I don't know. What can you give me on data centers?
Well, all I can give you on data centers is that I don't understand how this has come online so fast. Like it's been within a year that the planning of data center construction has just quadrupled. It's everywhere now. And I mean, if you look at a map of Texas where data centers are supposed to be going in, they are all over the place, especially in the Panhandle in West Texas, and it's all very confusing to me. There is one that is going up tangibly. I can see it, from the road at Childress, Texas, that is massive. And I came down through there in the middle of the night here several weeks ago, and I mean the lights in the sky just overpower the city lights of Childress.
What are they
And
lighting? Is it like construction lights?
yeah, construction lights. I
Oh,
mean, it's 24-hour construction, and of course, across the road, there's like I don't know, maybe 1,000 or more acres of solar panels. But it's just totally bizarre how this thing has gone on so fast. I know of one ranch west of me that sold 100, or I mean, sold 33,000 acres
that's the other
uh,
thing I don't
for
get.
data centers. I'm like,
30?
what are
I
they going
can't
to put
even
a
wrap
data
my head
center?
around that.
Yeah, me neither. And so I have no knowledge or understanding of data centers other than it takes a very broad spectrum to facilitate all of the data that we are. It's
All right, the
the,
whole
we used
AI
to talk
thing.
about the data superhighway, right? And I guess that's what we're facilitating here. I don't understand it. I don't know. Everybody says they take a lot of water. I had text yesterday that there was a data center coming to Alney, Texas, and I'm like, well, we need to be able to prove all that. And there's NDAs being signed by landowners, and so we really are going to get into a property rights discussion on this, and these communities, especially in the South, where water is dependent upon runoff, like in Alney, Texas, where I live, we depend on rainwater to feed the town. And so, if you have all these data centers using this water that they need, we don't know what that looks like. We don't know who's going to own the water, and then who owns these data centers, and what is the future of the data centers when, like every other business, they resell and sell and resell,
Yeah,
and
and yeah, who's paying
who's
for it
owning
all?
them?
Who's
Yeah.
buying all that land? I mean, that
Hmm.
who's financing it?
Yeah.
Nothing seems clear on this. So we'll
Yeah.
we'll get on it.
Well, we need to.
And the other thing is, Trump has seemed like kind of for. I've heard him talk about he is kind of for some of these projects. Um, but so I think there's a lot of wariness on that. But one thing that was great, I mean, unless they're the biggest hypocrites ever, we were at, two cabinet members in Washington, D.C., talking about these property rights issues, eminent domain, putting together a plan so that farmers and ranchers' land cannot be taken over by these kind of rogue organizations, really like the John Rich thing comes to mind,
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
TVA, um, which I believe is like an electrical,
That's right.
what's the word? Municipality, right?
It
Yeah,
is
there we go.
Tennessee Valley
Yeah.
Authority. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. And so those are the kind of things that come to mind. And then it's like, well, again, it's a good thing. We have a
Well, and
Secretary
it
of
feels,
Agriculture
yeah.
who's very focused on private property rights for farming and ranching. So
Well, and right now it just feels like that these are private negotiations, right, on the data
yeah.
centers, that they're going to the landowners and buying the land, and I'm sure they're giving, way above market price for them so they can implement this stuff. And of course, then down the road, I'm sure they're getting federal subsidies somehow. It's just another way to increase the cost of food production in America, lose our sovereignty and our ability to protect our private property. Listen, money talks, and I'm not going to disparage anybody who says, you know what, I'm at the end of the road. I want to sell my land to data centers. I wish they wouldn't. I can't say that I would never be there because I never say never, right? I mean, if your land's worth $500 an acre and a data center comes in and says, "Hey, we'll give you $5,000 an acre," you're going to consider that. It's just the way of the beast. So, but I think we
Well,
do need to learn more about it, Jim.
right. Well, we're off of the outline, so let's just keep going off the outline because you're talking about what would it take, and money talks and all of that kind of stuff. And right now we're looking at another highs in feeder cattle, I guess. And so
Mhm.
I think just, give us the Texas rancher, yearling guy point of view of where we're at because it's like, you drive down the road and you think about these prices that cattle are getting, right? So, which is, um, how much is like a four-weight calf worth, right?
Oh,
Like,
minimum $2,100.
okay, so
Minimum.
there you go. And you think about who is buying these, right? Or where are
Hmm.
they getting the money? And if
Sure.
you're someone who has to have those calves to make a living, what are you doing? Which, your
Correct.
country, North Texas, wheat pasture area, is filled with guys that make their living off of those calves. And now you have to have millions of dollars at this point to fill your operation, to buy your inventory as like a
That's
civilian would
correct.
say.
That's correct. Well, I think the first thing you have to say and recognize is that the cowman who has his cows and land paid for or almost paid for are in the driver's seat. They're getting a premium for their calves. And listen, the ones that are getting the real premium are a little bit ahead of the guys that are getting the regular price because those are still premiums. It's an unbelievable sight what these guys are doing. Now, I will say at the same time, our inputs have gone out of sight. Obviously, that is no question about it. Now, if you are in the stalker sector right now, the main concern is, and we alluded to this a long time ago, is how do we buy in, right? I've said many, many times that we'll see more people go out on this high market than we ever have in history. And that is certainly looking like the road we are on in terms of the stalker segment. It is just too risky and too high for these stalker guys to get in. So likely, I know a lot of people running, uh, that normally run tens of thousands of lightweight cattle and graze them over on wheat, that are, some of them are in and some of them are out. But the ones that are in, let's just say one of the normal guys that runs 10,000 head and he's buying, uh, you know, that many calves and they're costing him $1,800 to $2,100 depending on what he's buying. But I would say just on an average, a 375 to 425 pound calf costing in the neighborhood of $2,000. Well, you're looking at a pretty big buy cost right there. And no matter how strong anybody is, my conscience goes to, well, if you do have that kind of access to capital, are you going to take that risk? Because it's a hell of a risk. And honestly, at these prices, Jim, the cattle, if it's a steer, he might make a little bit, if you're able to protect, uh, do some price insurance and protect that investment. A heifer, unless you breed her, does not work. That's at least on my program, and my program's been pretty consistent over the years. Now it's starting to deregulate itself a little bit because of the price of inputs and the cost of cattle and cattle health. Many, many things are contributing to that volatility. But listen, I don't know. I don't know where this is headed. The market has been sharply up for a long time. In fact, since we interviewed Secretary Rollins and really witnessed that bounce back after the Argentina comments from President Trump, this thing has just gone high, high. I mean, a last calf cow right now at the sale barn bringing $2,700 to $3,000 if she's got one more calf in her, maybe two. The killer cows, $2,200 a head. It's wild and woolly. These yearlings, I don't know who. I'm going to say the the main part of this yearling deal, this stalker deal, if you're running big numbers, and I'm not talking about a guy like me, I'm talking about the big numbers, the guys that run 10,000 or more, they probably have some sort of contract down the road already and are just fulfilling that contract with, or partnership with the corporates somehow. I would say that's the only way they could do it. I mean, I know some really, really stout, financially stout people that have played in the game a long, long time, but they're not, and they are risk takers, but they're not stupid, right? I mean, they're very sensible people, and I would say that you're not going to go out there and personally risk $20 million on 10,000 head just for a buy cost, and then add another, 600, $700 a head in inputs onto that animal, without some sort of insurance down the road. That takes a lot of capital, and with that much capital, it takes a lot of assets to cover that. And maybe I'm just out of the game now. I don't know. But it's sure scary to me, just the sheer amount of money it's taking, Jim. So kudos to the cow guys. They're in the driver's seat, and I'm glad for them. I'm happy for them. As a yearling guy, I can't play in this. I mean, I'm at half capacity what I need, and I'm scared to go out and buy more. I mean, it's just going to take so much more money, and I'm like, what do you do? So,
Yeah, and so that's the end we're getting at is um as it does take more and more money, people start
mhm,
looking for more and more ways to get it, you know. And in the hog thing in the 90s, it was they weren't worth anything. And so guys had to go out and get contracts, right, with the big corporations in order to save their places. But
mhm,
now cattle are worth so much that nobody can afford them.
right,
And so um, back then it was guys with hog barns filled with worthless hogs,
right,
and now it's guys like you that are sitting with acres and acres of empty wheat pasture, right? And you
Mhm.
have to do something. So the fear is that you're tying yourself into contracts with the big
Correct.
corporate operators in order to fill those
That's
acres
right.
and
Loss of
then
independence.
right, yeah, and so then you lose your independence, and then once the market kind of regulates itself back, hopefully, and we increase the herd, and we're able to just build the beef the cattle industry back kind of as it should be, and continue to get more demand in beef, and all of that continues, then that reliance and those contracts like tend to work themselves down, right? So
Hmm.
like the stocker guy, the corporate feed yard gets controlled and partners
Hmm.
up with the beef packer, the beef, and
That's
then the
right.
corporate feed yard gets controls and partners up with the stalker
That's
guy,
right.
and then the next guy on the list is the cow calf guy, and so
Which
that's the fear, I guess, that we're
that
trying
is
to
the fear.
explain there.
That is the fear. And what that will do ultimately is the loss of independent middlemen, or the segmented men will require a gain, as we build the herd back, a gain of control in their function. In other words, what we're going to see is we're going to see these cow calf guys have to must start adhering to these rules, these environmental rules and regulations you and I have been talking about for a long time. That's what's going to happen here, because we know that there is kind of a move to push these calves off the cow straight into the feed yard in this stalker segment of the industry. And so that is going to give the packers more leverage to bring those rules down the supply chain. And then the cow calf guy has to abide by them. And that's kind of where I feel like we may be going here right now. I mean, look at the beef on dairy deal. I mean, that is a prime example of what the calf is born, and the next day that calf is in some sort of confinement facility, and they're giving a ton of money for them. And that is going to lead to what we're seeing, in Southwest Nebraska at Black Shirt Feeders. And that was kind of his pitch on the goal, is to see these segments go away so they can have total control of the supply chain.
Yeah.
And
And not
listen,
just for
the
like regulation wise, but also just for like pricing wise. Like they're going into
sure,
every year not knowing what things are going to cost, but if they can control like what we talk about, vertical integration,
correct,
like the pig industry is, if you go into
correct.
every year and you know exactly how much stuff's going to cost, that's what the top of the supply chain wants.
Well, and the top of the supply chain will force the bottom, or the cow calf, the factory, to become a price taker. He's at their service. He's a serf to them anyway, even though he owns his cow and he owns his land, which many of them in the north do, and I'm proud for him. But he will ultimately become a price taker because of the lack of competition that is coming through this exit of the industry.
Yes.
And that's the danger of the whole thing. I mean, we saw the news about the Lubbock feeders um, going to start, downsizing and shutting their doors ultimately down the road. That is a part of this. That is a part of losing this segmented part of the industry. So lots of lots of things to think about there. I mean, yes, the cow calf guy is in the driver's seat, and yes, that is good. But as these prices continue to soar, you have these other segments have to have access to the capital to keep the competition at least somewhere in there,
That's
right?
the key word. Is as this continues, we have to
Hmm.
keep competitive markets
Hmm.
involved, right?
Correct.
Because and however that would work, but that's what needs to be kind of a focus at this time,
That's
because
correct.
people are going to leave, and it's going to whittle away at how many bidders and buyers there are over
Sure.
the next few years if this continues. And
We
so,
really need to focus, Jim, on how we can get this cow herd back up. I mean, that is a major, major issue. We've got to figure this out. and people going to have to start keeping these heifers because listen, we're at an all-time low right now. And for me, just in my everyday way of thinking, which isn't right, as most people know, it becomes a sovereignty issue. Like, how are we going to feed our nation? How are we going to maintain the leverage of power by the people against a tyrannical government if we don't have access to our food production and food supply chains? I mean, those are real issues, and I know that doesn't make a whole lot of it makes sense, but it's far fetched for a lot of people to understand. But it is all interwoven, and that's what's kind of got me. I'm sitting here going, well, when is this? So,
Yeah. All right. Well, we went way off the track there, but one thing that is on the outline is the glyphosate executive order.
yes.
Which people, I feel like that topic gets you're either it's poison and we're soaking all our food with it, or it's completely fine and there's nothing to worry about. Like those are the two ends of the spectrum that you kind of feel, I don't know, that are always talking. And I feel like I'm kind of in the middle because people ask me, we are grain farmers and we use it. Yeah. And as far as the Trump, and on those two ends of the spectrum, you have the people who are saying, Trump's now being bought off by the chemical companies. And then you
Right.
have the other people who are saying, no, this is actually, we are using this and it is an essential, like, what did he call it? I guess it's essential to food security. And that's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
much what the
absolutely.
executive order was.
Well, and you and I talked about this a year ago. I mean, this was one of the first things we talked about, and you were very, very adamant on pressing balance on this issue. And it is a big deal. And all we have to do is look to Sri Lanka in 2021, where President Rajapaksa, I think that's his name, decided, in his cabinet decided that Sri Lanka would be the very first all sustainable nation in the world, and they just cut off all access to pesticides, herbicides, and those agrochemicals that we use to grow our food. And within 6 months, that nation was starving. Now, there was a prerequisite there of a economic crisis that had already unfolded. They were kind of coming out of it, but then when he called this to order, and man, they lost in 6 months. They lost 20% of their rice production, and by the end of the year, by November, this all started in April, and by November they were importing all of their rice. And apparently, they produce a lot of tea. That is their major export over there, Jim. And they lost 50% of their tea. Um, Tea production and almost all of their export in that 6 months. And of course, it led to a lot of economics and social chaos, and led to some starvation issues. And so you have to, this is something we've talked about, looking to Sri Lanka for these answers, because they are an example of what happened and what could happen immediately. Like, this isn't,
Right.
one of
If,
the
yeah, it's if the Maha people, not the whole coalition or whatever you want to call that, but there's a group I feel like that have no real connection or understanding of the overall agriculture, U.S. agriculture kind of model or how we operate, and so
Mhm.
and they just think glyphosate bad, we need to ban it today, right? And they don't have to think about what would happen, right? Even if it is like the worst thing in the world, we still can't have people starving, right? And I feel like that's what Trump's executive order was. And Kennedy, Secretary Kennedy came out and had a really good post, I think, on Twitter, where he kind of went into it, but then he also, I'm not going to read it all, but he says, I support President Trump's executive order to bring agricultural chemical production back to the United States and end our near total resilience on adversarial nations. His EO, executive order, protects two pillars of national strength: our defense readiness and our food supply. When hostile actors control critical inputs, they directly threaten the security of the American people. The Trump administration will secure these supply chains to eliminate that vulnerability. He says President Trump did not build our current system. He inherited it. For decades, Washington designed modern agriculture. Policymakers wrote farm policy, directed research dollars, structured subsidies and crop insurance, and shaped commodity markets to reward monocultures and maximum yield. Those
Mm.
deliberate choices lock farmers into chemical dependence and prioritize short term output over long term soil vitality and human health. And that is all. I mean, that push for yield is also showing up in prices where corn is now worth $4 and 9 cents, I think, today or something. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of farmers have been, saying this too, but they also feel locked into kind of this system, this higher yields, higher yields, higher yields. And that's, as I've talked about in the past, when you look at the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and things like that, that's where a lot of that came from as far as this push. A lot of it was wheat at the time that were hit the hardest back then, but there was this push for higher yields because it was worth a lot. And then all of a sudden it wasn't
Yeah,
worth as
flooded the
much, and then they
market.
had to, continue to farm more and more ground to try to make up for the lower yields, and it's just this circle that the
Hmm.
ag that the USDA and the whole ag system has tried to prevent, but over
Well,
the years that's what it pushes for. So
yes, absolutely. And I think, we have to recognize that Rome wasn't built in a day, and we're
yeah.
not going to tear it down in a day, right? I mean, it was built on dependency and supposedly resilience, and I assume they did the best they could, but they really had got us addicted to this, and we're not
Yes.
going to just shut it off. We have to balance this because we have what do we have? 300 million people to feed. And I was thinking of last night, yesterday, we had to go to Fort Worth to pick up a deal. And we came back by and ate supper. And as we were driving by all of these, high-end chain restaurants like Texas Roadhouse and all those, they're full. I mean, they are
Oh,
absolutely full.
you
Those
can't
parking
get into
lots
one
are
on a Saturday
flowing.
night.
I mean, they are flowing over every single restaurant. And I told Thea, I said, here we are in the middle of this huge urban metropolis. Dallas Fort Worth is probably 100 miles wide, maybe more. And you have all these people that need food. And you think that it doesn't take an act of Congress to create that much food? I mean, these people, the consumer, are demanding, have this demand for food. And it's it is so large and massive. It's such a huge infrastructure. We have to be able to feed all these people, right? And
Hmm.
feed their demands. So we have to be I totally support the Mayhaw movement. I'm 100% for it. All this regenerative talk, yes, it's great, but we can't do it immediately, and we can't do it by itself. It takes some size to be able to do that, feed this nation. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing act for sure, buddy.
Right. Yeah. And he says at HHS, I'm leading coordinated effort grounded in gold standard science, working along with Secretary Rollins and Lee Zeldin to expedite a better future where a thriving agricultural system is less dependent on harmful chemicals. We are sharing data, coordinating strategy, and supporting farmers through practical transition.
Mm.
I think it's great that it's being looked into. And a lot of, people have asked me, and being from Iowa, where it's like now everyone wants to talk about we're the leader in cancer. And so, but they're like, isn't that causing cancer and all that? And I'm like, well, they really don't know. I mean, no one knows what it is in Iowa or, whatever. I know that, but being just common sense in working in agriculture and around a lot of grain farming and a lot of chemical application, I don't think that like exposure to Roundup or these chemicals is causing cancer because if it would be a disproportionate number of chemical applicators, a lot of which work for years and years. My dad's been spraying Roundup for his entire life. He's 78, does not have cancer. That's not, I need to knock on wood, I suppose,
Yeah,
or
knock on
whatever.
wood.
But, you know, accidents happen with that stuff, no matter how careful you are, and you get it on yourself. And if you're
Well,
working with it for months out of the year, every year, which those guys are, if it caused cancer, it would be And I'm not saying it doesn't. I think the long-term effect, that was my other part of my answer is that the long-term exposure to this stuff, I don't think has really been accurately measured either because of uh, the corporate kind of control over the
Yeah,
system.
absolutely. The lobby,
All right. So it's
right?
somewhere in the middle. Yeah. I
And
mean,
I'll tell
yes,
you
maybe
this.
it is causing cancer or in somebody brought up obesity, all of these health issues, and maybe it's just a giant combination of all the
And
things doing it.
I think it is a giant combination. I mean, it's I will tell you this, Jim, my dad never one time in his life was he ever around any kind of chemical. He was a
Right.
rancher, he never farmed, and he died with cancer. So,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
my
how do
grandpa
you
that was
know?
yeah, my grandpa that was 93, had been around it for who knows how many years and
Mhm.
was probably the least careful person of anything. He used to say that it was because he came out of World War II and now they're talking about some of the kind of promotional campaigns and they would say that it was safe to drink. 2,4-D was safe to drink and these different chemicals. And he would say, he would never drink it or try it, but he had been taught that, it was,
Yeah,
you don't need gloves or anything like that to
yeah,
handle a lot of this stuff. And he was just not careful about that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, and
yeah,
he died of just he got old and died. Never no cancer or nothing. Was one of the healthiest people up until, the end. So it's interesting. And I mean that's there's always different cases. There's people who smoke for 70 years, and don't get cancer and live a healthy life too.
my
Some people are
grandfather
just built a little
smoked his
different.
whole life and died at 94 years old.
Who
So,
did?
my grandfather.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Anyway, um, I guess the other thing in the news, another couple things in the news that have major impacts on agriculture over the last year. Endangerment finding reversal or removal from the Clean Air Act. And what that is, the endangerment finding was a finding that greenhouse gases are a danger to society pretty much. In 2009, it was added to the Clean Air Act that carbon dioxide and methane coming, it was the whole link to adding cattle, bringing cattle into to this climate change argument came from the endangerment finding. And so Trump's EPA now is removing that from the Clean Air Act, I think officially. But if you listen to any of this or read anything about it, they know that the lawsuits are coming from all the
Sure.
environmental wackos, and there's so much money behind this deal. But it is a great, wonderful step in the right direction. And I've talked about how what I want to see from the Trump administration more than anything is a dismantling of this carbon centric uh, attitude in agriculture, I guess. And
Hmm.
I mean, if you're looking for a first step, this is the way to do it. For those
Yes.
not familiar, the NCBA has a carbon neutral, carbon neutral goal by 2040. The whole carbon market, the biggest, you were talking about black shirt feeders. The owner of that said that anyone who doesn't think that ESG and the carbon market is going to be a thing of the future is living in a world of denial. So when I see this, it's kind of like, I mean, to get rid of the endangerment finding, you would have to be, according to him, living in a world of denial that all of this is kind of BS and made up to kind of facilitate the carbon market and the whole scam around global warming or climate change.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
we'll
and
have,
I can't remember what company. It was a huge company, not agriculture oriented, yesterday. I'm gonna have to look that back up. But they delineated all their ESG model, their DEI and
hmm
ESG model. And I was like, that is winning. That is
yeah,
winning.
right. I mean, we are moving in the right direction. But
Yes.
the carbon market thing, I tried to look that up, and they're all kind of dug their heels in because California can still have their cap and trade
Hmm.
market, and Washington State and all these nutty states that want to destroy their own kind of
Food supply.
business model. Um, they're still in on that. But I guess the main thing to being talked about in agriculture is getting rid of death, which everyone I'm sure is very excited about. But one thing that kind of, we have tractors that take death and my pickup takes it and stuff. So it's almost like, well, are they going to start manufacturing pickups without it? And now my pickup is going to be like worthless because no
You
one's going to
can't
want
run it
that?
without it. Yeah.
Or is it going to be made much easier to delete so that, it brings up a lot of questions, but
Well,
I
I
mean,
think
there,
the biggest question was with DEF was, as we poured our 8-gallon buckets of DEF in there, look at all the space in the landfills that those plastic jugs and those cardboard jugs took
yeah.
up. And I was like, this makes no sense at all.
Well, and also one of the main ingredients was
Urea.
nitrogen. So the same nitrogen that we needed for fertilizer, and so that goes into our inputs in agriculture.
Yeah.
And so they're talking about that how that should go down also. But I mean, you look at a year ago, there was a guy in prison in Wyoming because he'd been
Yes.
deleting
He
trucks,
deleted
and Trump
trucks. Yeah.
pardoned him. And that so we reported on that, but I don't think we ever reported on Trump pardoning him. But yes, we did. And there was a big YouTube guy who got thrown in jail for because he had deleted Diesel Dave was his name. He has like a YouTube channel, like a where they I don't know work on trucks, I guess. But yeah, he was in jail, and they had to I don't know if he had to bail out or what, but because for years and years ago he had deleted some pickups. It's just crazy. But anyway, the whole DEF system hopefully will be a thing of the hit,
Hopefully the DEF system will be dead.
right. We will look, it'll leave it to the history books. They'll be like,
That's
back in the
right.
old days, they had to
That's
dump
right.
this corrosive chemical into their motors. Anyway, we are, boy, we've been going at it for a while. Methane, but this ties right into that. Methane digesters, if you're not familiar, these large, mainly dairies, I think at this point, but then also some large feed yards have put in methane digesters to convert the methane they produce to natural gas. And that
Right.
money, had this open. The National Office and Official Field Staff Office of the Rural Business Cooperative Service, which is a, a department under the USDA. They put a 90-day administrative pause on biodigesters and controlled environment agriculture applications pending portfolio performance review. So I don't really even know what this is, but it sounds like the financing of these methane digesters through the USDA is on pause, which is great, great news for someone who believes that agriculture should exist in a bringing back the truth in agriculture, right? Like
Do
we
you
it
think
should.
that it's on pause for the contracts already in motion, or do you think it's on pause for those who have applied?
Let me read what this says. Rural business cooperative service programs for projects involving biodigesters in controlled environment agriculture, which such as vertical farming, hydroponics, aeroponics, and aquaponics. Sounds like a bunch of greenhouse stuff. This action is being taken to allow the agency to conduct a comprehensive review of the existing portfolio of such projects, including an assessment of delinquency rates, project performance, operational sustainability, and underwriting guidelines to ensure prudent stewardship of federal resources. It almost sounds like a fraud. They're looking into fraud, really, which I'm sure it's running
I'm
rampant
sure it's
through that.
rampant. I'm
Yeah.
sure it is.
It says this UL does not establish new eligibility requirements and does not constitute a determination regarding the merits or viability of any individual applicant or technology. And so, once again, I think this is a step in the right direction. What this brings to mind is when I talked to Harriet at the RCAF convention, and I said, I questioned kind of because this was around the time of the big beautiful bill, and I'm like, why aren't we just getting rid of all of the wind energy subsidies, right? Like, why aren't we just doing away with it? And she's like, well, there's all kinds of, I think that's what we all kind of thought when Trump won and he called wind a hoax and he doesn't want to see another windmill built ever again or during his administration. But it's kind of like you have to deal in reality once you're in there. And the reality is you'll get sued. The lawsuits will just come pouring in if you do like the knee-jerk reaction of just cutting everything off at once. So once they got in there, I think they just started digging on how do we do this. And one of the things they did, they passed a number of different requirements for the wind energy thing, like cutting off. It has to be made in the U.S. Put all these different requirements of being in business in that sector. And what Harriet said is what this is going to cause is, as far as financing, these companies won't be able to get financing because everything is going to be kind of up in the air. And
Yeah.
hopefully, and I mean, can you imagine? Are you going to finance a giant feedlot that says they're going to make $20 million off of this biodigester money when this whole program's kind of being put on hold right now? And so, yeah, nothing but good news. Is how I take it.
Well, speaking of lawsuits on renewable energy, did you see where the city of Sweetwater, Texas, is suing the
Oh yeah,
local? Yeah, that's a big deal.
yeah. So, you want to explain that?
No, I want you to explain it.
Well, aren't they suing because they've dumped a bunch of a wind
Correct.
energy company has dumped a bunch of their blades
That's right.
in the county? Or yeah, yeah. And so do they own the land that they're dumping the blades on? Or
I can't answer that.
yeah,
I just saw the lawsuit yesterday. I need to look into it, but I thought that was a pretty big deal. That the lifespan, excuse me, the lifespan of those um, wind farms is coming to an end. And certainly, like now they're tearing one of the very first wind farms I remember was between Albany and Abilene, Texas. And now that is lived its lifespan and they're tearing some of those down and it's a mess. So now obviously you have all these lifespans being coming to an end, and so they have to replace motors and blades, and so what do you do with all that stuff, right? I mean, that's the whole question is what do you do with all the product? I
yeah.
think that was the biggest product or biggest question with the solar farms coming in. When this solar farm sells down the road, who is responsible for the cleanup of all of this stuff, 100 years down the road? And those are the questions that need to be asked.
You know what question I have is who is the marketing genius, I guess, who came up with calling these things farms? You know what I mean? Like these are just industrial complexes that they now call farms. It drives me nuts when I hear like we
Well, I
have all
guess that's
these
true.
wonderful signs in our county because we have stopped the solar farm that was planned on coming through here. And so we have all these no solar farm signs everywhere. But when I see that or no wind farm, I guess. But still, it's like that's the opposite of a farm. You are taking a what people think of as a farm and you're turning it into a
Well, it's the
perpetual
magic. Yeah,
construction site.
it's the
Yeah.
magical magic of marketing, right?
Right.
That's what it's all about. It's all about the renewable energy. Everybody still, if we could just go back to coal, life would be so much better. Listen, there is no place that I live, either in Colorado or Texas, that I can't look north, east, south, or west and see these red lights flashing at night. Boom, 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 all over the place. And I know a lot of landowners got a lot of money for it, but the net result of that has yet to be discovered. It's yet to come. And I don't think it's going to be what everybody really thinks it is, because as we go down the road, everything changes, right? And I know that the solar farm or industrial complex over here at Windthorst, Texas, this week, I just read an article yesterday morning. I sent it to my father-in-law. They filed Chapter 11. They'll have to restructure that whole deal. Are you kidding me? I thought this is what we
Yeah.
wanted. But
Right. And these companies, like, hopefully, that's the other. I mean, the more and more stuff like that gets in the news, the less and less people are going to want to sign those contracts. And to me, that's the best news we
yeah,
could have. Hopefully, all those companies can just go away because,
no
I
doubt.
mean, yeah, they get bought and they get sold, and you sign a contract with one, and who knows who's going to have it by the end of the
Sure.
deal. It's just the whole deal's a mess, and it goes back to this kind of more transparent world we're living in, where the
Well,
actual truth is coming out about these
it's
outfits.
funny because I spoke at the Land and Liberty conference last week in Fort Worth, and there was a gentleman from out at Lubbock or near Lubbock that was there speaking as well, and we talked about these solar farms and how their lives were coming to an end. And so yesterday he sends me he sends me a video of this windmill, and the oil is just splashing all over and running all the way down this big pole, right, clear to the bottom. And I made the comment to him. I'm like, yeah, every one of them over at Seymour, Texas is like that. Every single one of them. And he says, that's where I videoed that, you know? But I mean, they're just a mess, one
I
after another after another.
That was that. I last time remember when we were driving around down there. We went from your place over to Guthrie. Is that Seymour in between there?
That's correct.
And that's
Yeah.
what I remember. And it was after that really rough winter. And and you think about the amount of oil it would take to paint those things brown the way that they're painted
I
brown.
know.
It's got to
I
be
know.
hundreds of gallons.
It's
And now that I
terrible.
drive around more and more, I just coming back from Oklahoma there last month. I saw a bunch of them. Just they're brown from the top to the bottom.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how
And
that's
as
green
that
energy for you, just
yeah,
dumping
as that
oil.
turns, is it spewing it out there, right? And they have this field of oil that's being spewed out there. And then right over here, less than 4 miles from my house, there's baby, my little boy. We were driving down the road and he says, look, that fan blade broke off. And it dang sure did. It broke off right in the middle. And I'm like, well, who was standing under that whenever, or what if the cattle or the, deer or whatever it is, where do those land as they're spinning around and they break off? I mean, who's liable for that? It's
Hmm.
just a mess.
Yeah. Well, we were right again about everything. You got anything else?
No, there's a lot to be talked about, and we're going to get to it all.
Data center. That brings us back. Well, we got to get going on this data center deal. I just need to
Well, and
start
we need to talk about,
boning up.
we need to talk about property rights. I've got this book. It's called The Naked Communist. It talks a lot about property rights, and everything I read in here, it just feels like the age of what we're living in. So uh, there's a
Naked
lot
communist. Sounds a little risque to
like
me, but
Cleon Skousen, but there's a lot to come.
it's not risque.
Not so far. It's just pretty blunt.
Hmm. Well, I'll let you. You give me a full review once you're done. Anyway, oh, we did get into here. So I was thinking about Lonesome history
Yeah,
and how we had to do all this work. I've got all these books like dog-eared. And so it doesn't have to be that much work. Maybe we can leave people with a little history lesson. This so what I'd like to do, Worst Hard Time. I
it's a
read
good
this not too
book.
long ago, and I know you had read it too. And
Yes,
so it's about the Great Depression. What I'd like to do is a full episode. I'd like to start with this because I think it ties into where we're living at right now so well because of, this push to go towards more regenerative practices, but also when I read this, I got to thinking about like what would the whole global warming or climate change push around the Dust Bowl. Could you imagine? I mean, they had dirt flying, giant clouds of dirt going from Western Oklahoma to out to the ocean. There was boats in the Atlantic Ocean that were getting Oklahoma dirt on them, and Washington D.C. got like covered in dirt at one point. And it was all yeah, very man-made, and I mean there was a ton of different factors that went into it, but that
yeah,
weather,
and a lot of coincidences too. I mean, the Dust Bowl did not create the stock market fall, right? I mean, it
oh
was
yeah,
just a timing issue
I
on
think the
so many
stock market
levels.
dropped before any of the dust.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And my grandma, when she was alive, she's dead now, but I can remember in 2011, she goes, Shad, we had rain during the Dust Bowl. She said we'd get a couple inches of rain and then it'd go several months without it. And I'm like, we haven't had rain in 4 years here. That was in 2009 to 2011, actually 2014. It was so dry all over the central part of the United States. There wasn't any rain, but the Dust Bowl was created when they said plow fence line to fence line, right?
Yeah, it goes
And
into what I was talking about with yields too. Like the price of wheat, I
for
think
sure.
was it World War One? Because that ended 1917, I
It
think.
got so high, the price of wheat got so high,
Mm-hmm.
and then they kept producing, and then the fall came, and then they had to do more,
Right.
just like
So
you're
they
talking
just
about.
pushed. Yeah.
Yep,
And
that's
and
right.
they were all first generation pretty much,
Yes.
in the 1920s, and a lot of them were had grown up in Russia and Germany
Yes.
and these places where they were really
They
good
were
at growing wheat.
building they
Yeah.
were building railroads out here to towns that had not even been created. Boise City, Oklahoma. There was a railroad right to Boise City, Oklahoma. Come out and live your dream out here. And these towns popped up and they were successful and they were prosperous. And then all of a sudden it was over.
Yeah, this book is a ton about Boise City, but also like the word boys, I believe, is that French? It's French. I think it means trees. And there, and that was the joke.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure I have to look that back up, but this is this is completely unplanned, so we're just going off memory. But it means something like that, like a forest or trees or something. And if you think of
okay.
Boise City, Oklahoma, there is no trees. There's not a big wooded area.
No, the
But they
only
called it
trees.
that. The railroad company and these investors, they just called it
Yes.
that just to get people there. It was like one of the biggest. That city is like one of the biggest scams ever they talk about in the book. They just lied their pants off to get people out there. And then they got out there and they got the land and they got to farm and they had a couple
And it
good
was
years.
prosperous for a little bit.
And what's amazing is how resilient. I mean, people had a couple good years and then they stayed during the whole Dust Bowl, which was like, I
Oh,
mean, they would stay 10 years through the Depression and everything. It was wild.
well, dadgum, look at my family. We're still there. I mean, they stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed. They wasn't going to leave, and we're
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah. Anyway, I
All
guess
right.
that's here's a quote. If the farmers of the high plains were laying the foundation for a time bomb that would shatter the natural world, any voices that implied such a thing were muted. Um, the real difficulty of the semi-arid belt is not the lack of rain, wrote Hardy Campbell in his manual, which sold for $2.50, but the loss of too much by evaporation. And this can be largely controlled by proper cultivation. So till
Yeah.
up the land, and it will stop rain from evaporating, and it will hold the water better. Um, but yeah, it gets into a lot, and it gets into the USDA and programs, and this Bennett
Mm-hmm.
guy who was kind of
Mm-hmm.
the pioneer of
Right.
erosion control and all of that stuff. Here it cited the Land College report, which stated that Oklahoma had lost 440 million tons of topsoil, and another survey out of Texas, which said 16.5 million acres had been eroded to a thin veneer. And now people were leaving the land to blow. It looked to Bennett, as if they were walking away from an accident without accepting any responsibility. What people were doing was not just a crime against nature, he said, but would ultimately starve the nation. Well, sounds kind of similar to what people are saying nowadays. All right.
All right.
Anyway, we'll work on that someday.
We got
But
lots to talk about, bro.
yeah. Thanks go to lonesomelands.com, click on support, keep us doing what you're doing. Look at that forehead. Get yourself a ball cap. I got new ones coming, new colors. New ones coming. Ear tags,
Wonder if you'll be nice enough
t-shirts.
to give me one.
Also, we got a lot of advertisers coming. I'm sorry I didn't get back to everybody. But yeah, we'll have most of these sponsored, which is wonderful too. Thanks to everybody for
Thank you to
everything.
everybody.
Adios. Oh, that's
Adios.
your line. See you next week.
Adios.
You got me saying it.